Let's welcome in Wyoming Congresswoman Harriet Hageman. Congresswoman Hageman, what is your reaction to the $8 billion that are going to be going to Ukraine?
So I have voted against giving additional funding to Ukraine. And the reason that I have is because we do not have any kind of an accounting so far for the money that we have already sent. We do know that over 50% of the funds that we have sent have been going to general government funding. This last bill that did pass the House gave $300 million for border security, which in light of what has happened with our own border under the Biden-Harris regime is an incredible insult to the American public. But perhaps as importantly, we have never been able to get any information as to when we know whether we are winning or losing this war. We are not receiving any metrics. We don't receive any kind of information as to by what metric do we know what is happening over there. We do know that most likely, ultimately, what is going to happen is that the Ukraine may very well lose the Donbass. And the fact is that as Congress, we are not getting the information we need. And as a result, we should not be sending additional funding at this time.
So, Congresswoman, just to clarify, you as a sitting member of Congress who's expected to vote on this is not kept in light of what's happening. You're kept in the dark. You don't know what's going on over in Ukraine.
We don't. And one of the things that I think any military specialist will tell you is that when you are going to go into a conflict, you have to understand, number one, what the risks are. Number two, what is it that is your ultimate goal? We can't even get that kind of an answer out of this administration. They won't tell us. If you remember, the only thing Joe Biden said is we'll give them as much money until as long as they need it. As long as they need money, we'll continue to give money. We are $35 trillion in debt in the United States. Every single dime that we send to Ukraine, we are borrowing and we are paying interest on. We have now passed the milestone where we are spending over $1 trillion on interest. We are spending more on interest than we are spending on our own national defense. And I have very grave concerns about our own ability to protect the homeland, if you will. And again, we're not getting the information we need out of this administration.
Congresswoman, just to follow up on that, as any business person would ask, what's the return on investment? When you see that many funds going over to a foreign country, when we have so many ailing problems here at home, how could one say there's any return at all?
I think that that is a very legitimate request and question, and that's why I keep saying, what is the end goal here? Is the end goal that they believe that they're going to be able to push Russia out of Ukraine entirely? I don't believe that that is a rational or reasonable belief. I don't think anybody believes that. I think even Ukraine recognizes that there is going to be a redrawing of lines at the end of this conflict, whatever that may be. So without having that information and knowing what the goal is, I don't think you can assess what the return on investment is. But one other thing that I would say, and I've talked to folks from Europe, and their response is, well, if we don't stop Russia here, they're going to invade all of Europe. Well, number one, I don't believe that. I don't believe that that is the circumstance of anything that Putin has said, and I don't think that that is the situation on the ground. But if that is the worry, then don't you think that those people in Europe ought to be ponying up additional cash? Don't you think that they ought to actually meet their obligation with NATO? Because they're not meeting their obligation right now. And we just learned in the last 2 months that they've actually been fudging the books even when they try to pretend that they are meeting their NATO obligation. They are doing it with smoke and mirrors rather than actually putting up the money and the defense and that they should be required to under NATO. So if they're not worried enough about what's going to happen with this situation in Ukraine, I don't understand why we're going to continue sending billions of dollars there.
Yeah, Congressman, you were one of 82 U.S. House members who voted against the short-term spending package. Why did you vote no on that?
Several things. I voted yes on the CR package last week because it includes the SAVE Act, which would shore up our elections and make sure that we are not going to allow illegal aliens to vote in our elections. So that's number one. But number two, managing and budgeting in this country pursuant to continuing resolutions and omnibus spending bills is no way to run a business. And it's absolutely no way to run the government. It's why we're $35 trillion in debt, because we do not make the fundamental policy policy decisions about agencies and about priorities and about where we should be spending our money and where agencies are wasting money. We're not going through and actually looking at the policy of what should be funded, what shouldn't be funded, and what kind of priorities we should have. But one other thing is that because they did this for 3 months, this expires on December 20th. This is very clearly the first step in a setup that they're going to try to ram another omnibus spending bill down our throats at the end of the year. And that is one of the most dangerous things that ever happens in Congress, from what I can tell. These omnibus spending bills, number one, they continue spending at the same level, if not at a higher level. The 2022 omnibus spending bill was an absolute disaster. It spent massive amounts of money that we don't have on programs and policies that we should not be implementing. An example is the Sustains Act. The Sustains Act was shoved inside that omnibus spending bill. It's something that has the potential of severely undermining private property rights in the United States, and nobody even knew anything about it. It never went through regular order. We didn't have markups in committee. It was just something that got shoved into the omnibus spending bill, and that's what I understand these folks do. So they're setting us up that we're going to have to do an omnibus spending bill, and again, that's why we're $35 trillion in debt, and why we have rogue agencies that are implementing policies that are not in the best interest of the American public.
Well, Congresswoman, let's shift to Kamala Harris for a moment. She continually talks about her baseless and vague plans to bolster the American economy, and she continues to pander to voters, flip-flopping on the major issue of energy production. Now, how does that impact your state of Wyoming?
Well, so first of all, she doesn't say anything. So I don't know that I can even agree that she's flip-flopping, because I know for a fact she's not changing her policies. Right now, this administration is trying to prevent oil and gas development in the state of Wyoming. Wyoming is the 8th largest producer of oil and gas in the United States, and we're the largest coal producer in the United States. This administration has absolutely gone to war with our fossil fuel industries. They have gone to war with the oil and gas industry and with our coal industry. They are doing everything in their power to prevent us from being able to produce reliable and affordable energy. So I know that she has come out and said things like, I'm not opposed to banning or opposed to fracking. I'm not going to ban fracking. They already are. And she's being extremely disingenuous when she gives that answer, because it is her agencies. It is the EPA. It is the BLM. It is the Forest Service. It's all of these federal agencies that are actually right now prohibiting the development of oil and gas and other resources and mining and the construction of right-of-ways on our federal lands. So when people say that she's flip-flopping or that she's taking a different policy than she did in 2019, that is absolutely untrue. It is her administration, it's her agencies that are doing it right now, and they are putting policies in place so that it will be impossible, for example, to develop oil and gas on 1.8 million acres in southwestern Wyoming. It will be impossible to continue to produce coal in the Powder River Basin, because their BLM has adopted a regulation saying it will be illegal to produce any more coal in the state of Wyoming, essentially, after 1941. So she has not changed her policy. She is not flip-flopping. This is a radical administration. Kamala Harris is not only a part of it, but leads it, and they will continue implementing these same policies if she is reelected in November, and they are going to turn our country into a third world country, because we are not going to be able to continue to produce affordable energy under these conditions and circumstances.
Yeah, and Congresswoman, I fear that if she is elected, we haven't even seen the half of it yet. Definitely a frightening thing. An important reminder to register to vote and get your friends registered as well. Congresswoman, as always, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.